Well, another day and another threat to fire somebody else from the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. There's a lot to unpackage here, and boy, oh boy, have we done some extra research on this to actually corroborate what Bill Pulte is saying. Now, I personally have been a little bit of a Bill Pulte critic because I feel like he goes on X every single day and just bends the knee to Donald Trump about how terrible Jerome Powell is. But today is a very interesting day because I actually agree with something Bill Pulte is doing right now. Bill suggests, which is probably politically directed by Trump, especially since right now the only investigations that the Trump administration is really publicly pursuing are against Letitia James, Adam Schiff, and now Lisa Cook at the Fed, a Biden-appointed Federal Reserve Board governor. Obviously, Schiff and Letitia James, Democrats. Schiff, California Democrat, and then, of course, Letitia James, that Democratic attorney who wanted to get Trump, right? All of them now facing mortgage fraud allegations. And what's very fascinating is the evidence that we were able to dig up, given that we're in the real estate industry. I've got a real estate startup, after all, HouseHack. You can invest in it over at househack.com if you want. It's open to non-accredited investors. You can even use a credit card if you wanted to, but don't recommend it because the fees are a little higher for us, but it's no difference for you. People are earning their reward points investing in HouseHack. It's funny. But anyway, take a look at this. So Bill Pulte posted fraud at the Federal Reserve. And basically what he says and alleges is that Lisa Cook conducted or got a loan on her home in Michigan that she already had. So it would be a refinance. She took out a refinance. And then just 2 weeks after taking out a refinance on the Michigan property as a principal residence, ended up taking out a loan on an Atlanta condo also as a primary residence. Now, Fannie does have a few potential reasons that you could have two primary residences. It's unclear that any of those reasons, though, would really qualify for Lisa Cook's situation. As if you go to the Fannie website, you'll see the following. You could see that you could only have one principal residence, which is the property that you occupy, quote, most of the year. There are some carve-outs for military service members or parents of children who can't qualify, in which case they could be a non-occupant co-borrower as a principal residence, or they provide housing or as like their children provide them housing when they don't have the income. But Lisa Cook obviously has the income. So we don't think she qualifies for one of these other reasons for having multiple primary residences. And so what we did is we looked up as many of the deeds and documents as we could. And here's what we found. So the first thing is we found this mortgage document on the Michigan property. Now, I have removed any personal information here that is not public. We already know very publicly, based on what has been publicly announced by the director of the FHFA, Bill Pulte, that she owns this property in Michigan. CNBC is talking about how it's in Ann Arbor. I didn't even go as far as saying that. And so I've removed any kind of other additional identifying information like the mortgage loan number here or whatever. But what we know is that this loan was received on June 18th, 2021. Now, June 18th, 2021 is when she essentially closed on this loan. And she got this loan for $203,000. It looked like at the time it was a 15-year mortgage, and which you can get on investment properties as well, mind you. The mortgage documents did include the following clause: unless otherwise agreed upon in writing, which there were no amendments that I could find for this. Who knows? Maybe there was. But unless otherwise agreed in writing, the borrower shall occupy, establish, and use the property as the borrower's principal residence within 60 days of the signing of basically the mortgage. So in other words, in the middle of June, she took out a principal refinance on her home in Michigan. And here's the signature block zoomed out, which I purposefully show because you could see the signature blocks that Bill Pulte gives. And I just want you to see that I too have this similar signature. And I have a zoomed out document to show you, like, here's the zoomed out version of the document. It's like a 15-page mortgage. Now, within 15 days thereafter, she ended up closing right here on July 2nd on a condo in Atlanta for $602,000. And this particular mortgage loan shows right here, July 2nd, a mortgage loan amount of $540,000. Now, what's interesting about that is, while I couldn't get the actual mortgage document because this document number goes to nothing, which is why I'm showing it here, because the document number goes to nothing. For some reason, it's missing. But what's interesting is if you bought a place for $602,000, how do you get a mortgage loan for $540,000 unless it's an owner-occupied loan? Because 540 divided by 602 is an 89.7% loan to value, which means it had to have been an occupied loan because you can't do 10% down on an investment property. You have to do at least 20% down, and more commonly, you do 25% down on an investment property. Now, this property, this Atlanta condo, does not list a homeowner exemption on the property tax rolls, so she's no longer claiming it as an owner occupied property on the tax rolls, at least as far as what we can see. And we can see that that might be fair because it was rented out in July, or listed at least for rent in July of 2022. Now, typically, when you get an owner-occupied loan, you're only agreeing to live in it for a year. Okay, so maybe the fact that it was listed for rent is fair. But how do you say, I'm going to live in a property for a year on June 18th, and then happen to 2 weeks later take out a loan on a home that you're buying in Atlanta saying you're going to live there for at least a year? It's possible, theoretically, that she closed her refinance in Michigan on the 18th, and then on the 19th is like, actually, I changed my mind. I want to buy a place in Atlanta, and I want to live there instead. Maybe her intent changed, but usually it takes more than 15 days to find a property, to buy a property, and to close on a loan. So it seems like these were overlapping intentions, and that's why the FHFA is now referring her to the Department of Justice for criminal charges, which Donald Trump is now suggesting this is all he needs to potentially fire Lisa Cook for cause. Donald Trump says Cook must resign now, quoting the Bloomberg article on this. And the Wall Street Journal is saying Trump considers firing Cook after the accusation of mortgage fraud. And that's because, they are getting this insight from inside the White House, leaks from reporters or to reporters or whatever. Now, Trump could fire a Fed governor for cause, according to a 1935 law, which says that if, they do something wrong, they could be fired. Bill Pulte thinks this is exactly the kind of cause that would allow Trump to fire this Biden-appointed Fed governor. Keep in mind that Fed Governor Kugler already stepped down suddenly. This is kind of like a died suddenly here. Stepped down, and what you end up getting is this question that it was a surprise from colleagues that she stepped down. And a lot of people are wondering, okay, why did she step down? I personally made this analogy earlier that I think what happened is you ended up getting a Trump, staffer calling up Georgetown going, hey, Georgetown, we need you to give Federal Reserve Board member Kugler a really good job offer, an offer she can't refuse, so she steps down at the Federal Reserve. Now, why would Georgetown do that? Because Georgetown doesn't want to be like a Harvard or a Columbia or a UCLA that gets fined millions of dollars from the Trump administration. They'd rather give Cook a really cushy, or Kugler a really cushy salary and go, hey, Kugler, why don't you come back and work for us? Leave a vacancy at the Fed. The vacancies at the Fed are filled by Trump. So Trump is literally going down the list of people he doesn't like, Let's investigate Schiff in California. Let's get back on Letitia James. Oh, we don't like the Fed. We can't fire Powell. We can't cut the head of the Leviathan off. Oh, let's investigate all of the underlying board members. Oh, Kugler, get her a job at Georgetown. Gone. Now he can put his Trojan horse in. Oh, Lisa Cook tends to vote with J-Pow on holding rates steady. Do we have any dirt on her? Oh, what's this? You got a $203,000 mortgage within 2 weeks of getting a new mortgage in Georgia? How interesting. Let's refer you to for fraud. Oh, mind you, also on your financial disclosures in 2023, you indicated that you had 2 mortgages on personal residences. Well, this is a 2023 disclosure. Even if it was legal to have mortgages on 2 personal residences, how do you have mortgages on 2 personal residences here when literally one of those you listed for rent? So it's obviously an investment and not a personal residence anymore. So yeah, I think the thing is, when you get into politics, somebody like Trump who says, I'm not going to weaponize the justice system, I think you need to recognize the justice system was so weaponized against him that he's going to do absolutely anything in his power to weaponize the justice system back. Now, obviously, all of this leads to J-Hole. So J-Hole is really interesting because J-Hole comes Friday and Lisa Cook is at Jackson Hole. Now, you already know this, that, Meet Kevin is not only sending his 10 buy alerts for the next 10 years over the next 6 to 8 weeks here to all course members, but you could use coupon code JHOLE before Friday, before this offer expires, to get all 8 courses, every trade alert, the 10-year buy list, every alpha report, every private live stream, everything over at the Meet Kevin membership, everything in one price. And you can get that over at meetkevin.com. On Monday, for example, we thought that Tesla was going to go to 318, went to 318 within 3 days. On Monday, we said we're not bullish Qs calls. We actually think we're going to lose 577. What happened? Every single day this week has not been a bullish day for the Qs. We called that Monday morning before the market opened. And so if you want these sort of insights, make sure you're part of the Alpha Reports, the Meet Kevin membership. You pay once and you get lifetime access. It's great. You want these lines. I mean, you can't make this up. Look at this. Intel perfectly rejecting the 2387 line. Just another example of how these lines kick butt. And we'd love for you to not only see the lines that we have, which you could see regularly, but also how we make them, it's more than just, here's my take on what's happening. It's teaching you so you can see how I get the alpha that we utilize and then get trades on. So do check that out over at meetkevin.com for the Meet Kevin membership. That said, a lot of people really focused on the Federal Reserve this week. And obviously, if Donald Trump is able to gut the interior of the Federal Reserve and basically get a bunch of people to vote for rate cuts, then maybe that increases the odds of rate cuts. If you actually go look at world interest rate probabilities, right now we have an 84.5% chance of a rate cut September 17th. The problem with that is if Powell ends up hawking at J-Hole on Friday, then we're screwed, because we're going to be in a place where the market has to now unprice an 84% chance of rate cuts. And even if that goes down to a coin toss, it's going to lead to a little bit of nervousness in markets. Bloomberg, I don't know that I necessarily agree with this, but Bloomberg is noticing calls selling accelerating on Meta, Tesla, and Amazon per spot gamma. Top 8 stocks in the S&P 500 now represent more than 33% of the index, which is leading to people being concerned about a slowing of AI spend by NVIDIA or by companies relating to NVIDIA. So like Meta, for example, talking about lowering CapEx or reducing AI roles. And potentially the impact of higher interest rates for longer on the broader economy. So we'll see. But this is definitely some of the drama that's going on right now. And I hate to say it, but for the first time in a while, because I've always looked at Bill Pulte as just basically a knee bender. But you know me, like, first of all, my goal is to be hated by everybody. But the second thing is my goal is to be right. My goal is accuracy. So, like, if what Bill Pulte is saying is right, I'm going to tell you it's right. If I think he's being, a bullshitter or a knee bender, I'm going to tell you that. And if I think that I have evidence that something he's saying is wrong, I'm going to tell you that too. But in this case, based on what I'm seeing so far, as somebody that, I don't think I'm like bragging here. I think I'm an expert in real estate. That's like my bread and butter, especially with our real estate startup house. Like, I think that there is a lot of smoke here, and it's going to be really hard for Cook to argue that her intentions changed magically within 2 weeks when she just closed on a refinance for her home in Michigan. She probably made an oopsie doopsies here. And as a result, she'll probably, honestly, they're replaced. And then Donald Trump is going to have, 2 more people who were voting with Powell now voting against Powell, because they'll end up being, Trump chills, basically. Now, does that lead to some questioning of Federal Reserve independence? Absolutely. Of course. In the longer term, yes, that does affect Federal Reserve credibility. But in the near term, it does also increase the likelihood of, getting more rate cuts sooner, because you're going to get a whole lot of pressure on Powell, and you're going to get a lot of dissension voting against Powell. And it's just a matter of time until Donald Trump finds yet another governor to start spitting on or potentially looking for cause to fire. Still haven't heard from the Powell lawsuit, by the way. Mostly, I think that Powell lawsuit's going to be a really tough one. You would really have to argue, especially since Powell has not only Supreme Court essential immunity, but sovereign immunity. You'd really have to argue that Powell's building out of the Federal Reserve basement, which was approved by so many different layers of government, with somehow gross negligence and incompetence. And that would be the way that Trump could sue Powell. But the aggression continues, and that gives you a full breakdown of what's going on there.
Why not advertise these things that you told us here? I feel like nobody else knows about this.
We'll try a little advertising and see how it goes.
Congratulations, man. You have done so much. People love you. People look up to you.
Kevin Paffrath there, financial analyst and YouTuber. Meet Kevin. Always great to get your take.